advice. Our next speaker is Dr. Kim Barrett, who is the Dean of the Graduate Division here at the University of California, San Diego, and she's going to give us some advice for specifics about academia and research.
So good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to have been included in this symposium. I'm going to be going in a little different direction because I'm talking about academic positions where your value is not necessarily how much money that you can make for the company. However, you do have to demonstrate value, and I'm going to be focused on research positions, and Jen is going to talk about primarily teaching positions. So, thank you. So getting to the finish line, if you have the opportunity to negotiate, you've gone through a lot already, but you're not quite there yet. Typically for an academic position, it's a much longer process than moving into the private sector. You might take months, even a year, to fully negotiate the terms of an academic position, because they're not in any real hurry. It's not like the company's going to go bust if you don't show up tomorrow. So typically in a position in academia, you would be waiting till around the second visit to even start having these sorts of conversations. You don't want to begin negotiating until you actually have an offer. So don't start saying what it is you want, what it is you need, until the people that you're negotiating with have the chance to offer you something to begin with. And it takes a long time, which I've already said. Many, many emails back and forth, phone calls. The 24-hour thing would never fly. What can you negotiate if you are applying for and have been offered a faculty position in a primarily research role? Well, just like we've already heard, salary is one of the things that you can negotiate for, but in many ways it may be one of the least important things, not to say that it's not important. You can negotiate for lab space, and not just what that lab space looks like in terms of its size, where it is, who are your neighbors around you that you will be collaborating with and interacting with? And what sort of renovations might you need to do the precise sort of research that you want to do? The biggest thing that you're going to be negotiating for, and probably the most challenging if you've never done this, is your startup package. This could be equipment, supplies, money to support personnel and students, access to core facilities. If you're moving into a position where there's some expectation for grant funding for part of your salary, maybe there'll be a period where your salary will be supported. You can negotiate your job description. You think you're going there to do research and teach and maybe serve on some committees, but the precise combination of those activities is all negotiable. And most importantly, you might want to negotiate for protected time when you first get there. So maybe in the long run, you're going to be teaching 2 or 3 courses a year, but at the beginning, maybe you don't want to be teaching any courses while you get your lab set up. You can negotiate for money to move, you can negotiate for help with job search for your spouse or partner, and basically just about anything that will help you succeed in doing this job. So how do you approach that negotiation when you've got the call or the sense that they really want to hire you for this faculty role? You need to do your homework ahead of time. You've heard this already from several speakers. You want to have a list that you make up that is what is essential for you to do your research, what is desirable, and what is dispensable. And you'll probably want to have your private list, which is how you have prioritized these various things, versus the list that you're going to share with the institution. It needs to be a win-win. Other speakers have already said this. You need to remember that you are in a position of considerable power. Searching for new faculty, like searching for any staff, is expensive, and the institution is not going to see any return on that investment if you're set up to fail. If they give you a big startup package, and because you don't have what you need to do your research, down the road you're either going to leave or not get tenure or whatever it is. So it's got to be a win-win. You need to negotiate in good faith, and sometimes you've got to get a sense of what the institution can and cannot do, perhaps by talking to colleagues or prospective colleagues. And if they ask you for some information, get back to them as quickly as possible. So, again, some aspects of academic negotiation are exactly the same as any other job. Knowledge is power. We'll talk a little more about that. You also, when you're having either a telephone conversation or a meeting to talk about the package, you want to have a sense ahead of time of a limited number of agenda items, and then tell your counterpart, typically the department chair, what it is you want to talk about in that conversation. Like, I'd like to have a discussion about the salary, or can we talk about lab renovations at our next meeting? Not the specifics of what you're going to ask for, but just so that they'll be prepared to know what they can and cannot do. Keep the super objective in mind, the fact that both parties want this to be a successful relationship. And does anybody know what a BATNA is? The people in the front, I would hope no. So this is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's business school speak. But you've always got to know what it is that you absolutely have to have, and what is the best alternative. You might be willing to give way on some things, but sometimes the best alternative is to say, I'm not going to be able to succeed in this institution, and much as I want that tenure track job, I'm going to walk away. In academia, you need to get everything in writing. The chairman may change, the dean may change, the whole institution leadership may change. You may still be there. And if you just have verbal promises of, we will pay your salary for 5 years and a technician and give you this much money, that is not worth anything. Now, in law, verbal agreements are binding, but in academia, you'd be really hard-pressed to get those things held up. So get it in writing. If the chairman is not very quick about writing things down for you, you write it down. And you send an email and you say, thank you very much for that wonderful conversation we had yesterday. Here's what I think we agreed to. Please let me know if I have anything wrong. You want to seem appreciative and enthusiastic. This is not to say that you just accept everything that you're offered. Oh, wow, that's more than I thought I would get. But you want to come to it and say, I'm excited about joining the department. I'm excited about this opportunity. So be enthusiastic. But you also want to have the opportunity to sort of call a brief delay in negotiations as you need to. Maybe you want to take the details of the startup package to your mentor or some other colleague so that you can talk it over. So never just agree to things up front. At the end of the meeting, say, okay, here's what I think that we've discussed. Now I'd like a chance to think about that, and maybe we can talk again in a couple of days' time. As I said, knowledge is power. You need to use online resources to benchmark salary and other aspects of the offer. There's a medical school survey that's done every year that will tell you faculty compensation. This is just one thing I found looking up startup package. It's a little bit out of date. But the typical startup package now for a research university, for a physiology faculty, would be anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million. So that's a lot of money that's being invested in you. You want to ask people or your peers who recently got a job, what did they get? You want to know what you must have before you go on the very first interview. You don't need to tell people that that's what you must have, but if you go on the interview, it gives you a chance to sort of snoop around. Do they have a germ-free facility? Do they have the wonderful sequencing facility that I need to do my research? Then road test your wish list with a senior mentor and rehearse it. You've heard that from others, so I won't belabor that. Your startup package needs to have enough to cover the costs until you have some other way to support your research activities. So how long do you have to spend that research startup package? What happens if you get a grant? Does that mean your startup package immediately goes back to the department? Or do you get to put it in a flexible account that you can then use to build further research activities? What happens if you don't get a grant? Or what happens if you get a grant and then you lose it? You might want to negotiate up front about what you'll do in those transition times, what can bridge you across difficult times in your lab. Everybody knows right now it's not very easy to get research funding, and so these transitions are maybe something you want to consider up front. If you're an internal candidate, and I know I have the red thing, so you want to estimate your bargaining position, how valuable have you made yourself, what would it cost to replace you, accept you might not get as big an offer that matches one from outside, but also test the market. Once you have the job, there may be many times when negotiation becomes necessary. Retentions, preemptive retentions, things that you'll get if you got a major grant or a major award. You always have to consider whether you're actually movable, because you don't want to play games with people. But it doesn't hurt to go out and explore opportunities from time to time. It reminds you that you're actually worth something, and it makes you revive your skills. I'm not going to talk about this because obviously it'll be online, but this is the same information that Catherine just presented. So careful negotiation will help you get what you want and you need to succeed, and never forget that this is a mutual objective, and good luck.